Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Greco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And today it is time to go back to the central question of this show. Is to be human, or are they dancer? This is our discussion and our ongoing discussion of Nier Automata. And we're up to the second run-through of Nier Automata, a.k.a. Route B. And to help me determine how human these robots are, I am joined, as always, by the master of machines himself, Pete Busby.
What's going on, everybody? Happy to be discussing one of my favorite subjects, and hopefully we'll all decide that nothing is human, there have never been humans, and it was a stupid concept to begin with. For the fun fact for this week's podcast, I thought I would pick something slightly relevant to the subject at hand. So, I found that in 2013, scientists at UC Santa Cruz taught a sea lion to keep a beat. So they would play like the Temptations or the Eurythmics, and the sea lion would bob its head along with it. Prior to this, the only mammals thought to do that were us, people. You could get birds to do it, mostly just parrots. So the theory was that keeping a beat was necessary for language capacity. But now we know it's not, and it's another thing people thought only humans could do is wrong, and it's a dumb thing to be looking for in the first place.
So did this sea lion show a capacity to keep a beat before we trained it and incentivized it, or did we make it learn about beats and love?
I think we made it. Apparently it was the sea lion's name's Ronan, if anyone cares, Ronan. It's a cool video, too, if you watch it. But no, we found what was called a very smart sea lion and then trained it to love music.
It really enjoys Daft Punk, hates Kenny Chesney. Mm. It's got good taste, too. What can I say? Oh, man, I want to know what music the sea lion enjoyed the most, or seemed to enjoy the most. But
there are videos on YouTube.
Did it show a preference?
It didn't say. I didn't read any of the published articles, but in the press release. Oh wait, no, sorry, I just found it. Currently, her favorite track seems to be Earth, Wind, and Fire's "Boogie Wonderland."
Yes,
that's a great choice.
If it had to be anything, I'm glad it was that.
Yeah, it's a solid pick. Apparently, she's better at it than the birds too. So good for her.
Good for her.
Aww.
And that other voice you hear is the Archduke of Automata, M. Palladino. Hello.
Hello. Happy to be here, talking about the middle child of the Nier Automata runs. Looking forward to it.
I always enjoy how you can describe a game as having a middle child within itself.
Yeah. There are certain runs that are better than others.
And this
Probably
is one
not
of them.
this one.
This is one of them.
Okay.
There are many runs
so.
in this game, and this is one.
There are. Mm-hmm.
Well, before we discuss that, we've got two orders of business that always come before the discussion. First, and this is a new order of business, so I guess always is a stretch, but we have a Patreon now. Patreon.com/deeplistens. You can help us fund this show and our hosting and our game expenses. We buy a game every 2 weeks generally, and it adds up. So if you could help us with our hosting fees and such, you can go to patreon.com/deeplistens. We've got a Discord that you can join if you select the Discord tier, and you can help support the show. You can talk to us. We are all on there. And we are making plans for the show. We are taking suggestions over there. Again, suggestions is not a guarantee, but we will discuss the games. We will be discussing the games that are coming up shortly. So check it out. Donate if you can. We appreciate it very much. Also, we have feedback. We've got emails. If you want to reach out to the show, you can do so at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. That's what people usually use, and here's some people that have used it. We've got an email. It says 100th episode reaction. This comes in from Nikki, and she says, Grandin's reaction to Pete's up Kingdom Hearts level. What a Sisyphean hell. For those who missed our last episode, we had an email that asked us what change we would make to Kingdom Hearts by adding a Disney experience or changing a character, and how would we make Kingdom Hearts worse but while still obeying the Disney rules. And Pete said that they should go to the world of Up and only the beginning of the movie Up.
I was pretty proud of that one. I'll be honest. I thought that was a pretty good pick. Kids need to learn about death early. It's important.
First level.
That's going to teach you everything you need to know about the rest of the game, and then you're going to fight Sephiroth.
Yep.
And that's the whole game.
You and Kevin will fight Sephiroth. We have another email. This comes in from Chris Zombie Pie Redacted, and I think this is actually an email. It's nice to finally get one that's an email and not some sort of scrawl. But what can you do? You know, I guess people give up. They just stop putting in the effort over time. Hope that's not how marriage works. We'll find out. Dear denizens of the internet, hopefully you all are having fun with Nier Automata, and I look forward to any possible Game of the Year discussions that may come from it. Though Gino may be aware, Pete and M should be aware I consider Nier an objectively bad game. Fun story.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think we're all on board.
Fun story, when I got to Route B, I was bored out of my mind, I fell asleep, and at the end, I missed the entire ending cinematic. Honestly, I grouped that Nier alongside Final Fantasy XII as a game that doesn't respect your time and is in dire need of a filter. Sure, it ends well, but Yoko Taro throws 12 fucking endings at you and hopes at least one works, and that isn't good writing. But mindless rants aside, I come to you bearing good news. I'm an official Patreon donor. Cool. Thank you. Thank you very much. Once I figure out how to make all of your newfangled chat room nonsense work, I look forward to loudly shouting at every one of you about mindless and random bullshit. Think I'm joking. Ask Gino about the millions of Steam and Slack messages I send him every hour of his waking life. He's not joking.
Yeah.
He's not joking. I get a lot of Slack and chat messages about basketball and other things. And now you will too.
Looking forward to that.
Yes. Speaking of which, let's get down to brass tacks. It's all in good fun. Thank you so much, ZP. Speaking of which, let's get down to brass tacks. It's time for the podcast to start building its brand. And I think that means more skits. Oddly enough, Pete already has one with his Animal Facts skit, even if the idea of corporate branding is bound to give him hives. That leaves Gino and M as the brandless automatons on a quest to find your humanity. And before you ask, you bet I already have ideas of my own. Here they are. 1. ZP Eats. Before the game discussion starts, I try at least one healthy food item I found in the grocery store I've never tried before. 2. ZP presents how it's made. Gino gives me a well-known prepared food dish that is widely regarded as being good, and I have to guess how it's made. I should mention I am someone who puts ketchup in spaghetti sauce. Fucking monster. Also,
oh, God.
I thought pesto was made out of mint. Just because something's green doesn't mean it's made of mint.
What? No.
Fuck. 3. Final. Yeah. M. What?
I'm offended. Go on.
3. Final Fantasy or Star Wars. Here I read a short biography of a character from the Final Fantasy series or a Star Wars Legends timeline. Remember the Star Wars?
I like that one.
The Star Wars Legends timeline includes everything that was at one point canon in Star Wars prior to Disney purchasing the franchise. And as Gino can attest, I can talk about my love for Star Wars Legends timeline for hours. He can. So, Gino and M, what ideas do you have brewing in the fleshy meat substances you call a brain? P.S. If Billy's on the podcast, remind him he needs to trademark my A Quickie with Billy skit idea. That shit was 100% on brand, and he needs to at least trademark the closing catchphrase I gave him, which is, as you may recall, I hope that was as good for you as it was for me.
So before we get started with your ideas, I would just like to jump in and point out that branding is only necessary in a commodities production context within which all products are indistinguishable except for their brand. There. Now continue.
So do you mean that since our quality is so different, we're distinguishable without the brand? We don't need it?
I guess
Please
it depends. It depends how far you think the culture industry has drifted into commodity production. Some would argue no, we're all indistinguishable, but I'll argue yes, we're better than everybody else, and so don't need branding.
Thank you. That's what I needed. You made my day. Do you have any skits brewing inside of you?
I mean, I hadn't thought about it. It sounds like ZP is signing on to be one of our writers. So we'll get a team together and start brainstorming.
We'll start workshopping. We'll get an intern. We won't pay them.
Yep. We have $6 in our Patreon right now.
But it's always going up.
That's true.
It's always going up. Up and to the right, always. And eventually we will be able to pay the intern something, a non-zero sum. But until that day comes, they'll be giving us great ideas, I assume.
Yep. Do you have any ideas?
Fuck, man. I don't know. Let's see.
This is all so sudden.
This is also sudden. It's coming. Well, I feel like the show is kind of my brand. I kind of started it. And I feel like the Final Fantasy stuff is already my brand. I already have entire sub-series of shows that I'm only, like, me and ZP are the only people who are consistent on. So I feel like that's kind of a branded thing unto itself. But if I had to come up with a shitty gimmick that I do every single show, I don't know.
Hey, I resent that. My gimmick is not shitty. It is great.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry, I'm sorry I attacked you. That was unnecessary. Let's see. I could read some bad No, we've done reading bad fan fiction. That's not even my gimmick. It would have to be fast, right? You'd want it to be a quick thing that we do?
Yeah, it's just like a one-off when you get introduced, really.
Yeah.
Maybe I just like read some of the things that Spotify thinks I like listening to on any given week and try to psychoanalyze what it thinks of me.
I was thinking close-up magic. You could just describe you doing magic tricks.
That's a great idea. I'm holding the cards, and I am cutting, and you are grabbing a card, and I'm saying, don't show it to me.
You are now amazed.
You put it back in the deck like a rube. I start shuffling, pull the card out.
It's yours.
It's your card.
You've been mind freaked.
Fuck. But I can't tell you how I did it because the magician's code. What if I just kept describing more and more elaborate tricks, and then because of the magician's code, I couldn't tell you how they were done? But they're always excellent. Okay, I'll try this. We'll see. We'll see if the magic tricks with Gino catches on. If it doesn't, we'll stop doing it. It's that simple.
Thus concludes the one episode of Magic Tricks with Gino.
So remember, for the first episode, you had your mind freaked by me pulling the card that you just drew. And I was shuffling. How could I have known? You know? It was pretty good. So, without further ado, let's discuss Nier Automata. When last we left Nier, we just finished Route A, where we were playing as a character named 2B. She was a sexy android lady with 2 swords who was running around the world killing machines because they were bad. And eventually you start to think, what if machines are people? And you keep killing them anyway until eventually you come across some android-looking machines. And you're androids, not machines. These are 2 distinct categories. The androids look like people, and the machines look like robots. And that means they are at war with each other because they're different. And you killed all of them. You eventually have these 2 robots named Adam and Eve. That's not suggestive at all. Don't even think about it. You kill Adam. It really pisses Eve off. Then you have to kill Eve. Then the game ends. And at the end of the game, your sidekick, 9S, becomes some sort of robot god. That sounds fair? That's a pretty good summary of Route A?
Yeah, it's as clear as the game is. I mean, I'm no more confused now when I finished it.
There's some detours in there, but overall I think we covered it.
Some robots are friendly, some are not friendly.
Mm-hmm.
You run.
Some go nuts.
You do fetch quests.
That's about it. Yep.
So, it turns out when you stop the game, it tells you that there's another playthrough. And if you hit new game or continue from your old save, it boots up. But this time, it's not the same game. You see, it starts off with you controlling a machine who is standing over the corpse of another machine, and I guess a machine corpse is just a machine that's turned off, right?
Yep.
But it's a little machine that is standing over its buddy, and it says, brother, I need to get up, please, get up, brother, and I need to fix you. So that you control this machine as he tries to bring his robot brother back to life. He walks over, you kind of scour this small environment, you find a bucket, and you can use that bucket to fill it up with oil, which this machine seems to think will bring his brother back to life. And he's this little Springbox machine, and he's very clumsy. Did you end up spilling the oil in his bucket?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Do you think he was... So, I mean, this brings up sort of two questions I have, right? So, like, these robots are designed to be soldiers, right? So
Ostensibly.
Ostensibly, right? At least as far as the lore goes as we have it now. So, presumably it would be inefficient to design either a clumsy robot or a young, let's say like a tiny boy-ish robot. So this had to be something that happened post, I don't know, network failure, post design, let's say. So do you think it's a hardware issue, or this is an affectation that the robot himself has adopted?
It seems as though all the robots that we come across, including this one, have their own affectations. Some, like, take on the role of, like, gender and various different levels of, like, sentience. I don't know what the proper term would be. Self-awareness. So, I don't know. I think we'll find out as we go along.
Yeah, I think the in-story answer is here later on in this playthrough for why these specific machines do what they do. But at the moment when you start the game, I think that at least my read of it without the knowledge that I got in this run, was that some of these machines, since they are off the network, have started to pick up their own affectations. And the designs, I inherently don't trust the story for how the machines got made, that it was a war between aliens and humans. And since I distrust that premise, I distrust that these machines were made specifically for combat. And I think that many of the basic machines are so clumsy and so poor at combat that the idea that they were made solely for that purpose just doesn't hold up to any scrutiny.
Yeah, that's a fair take. I mean, my main concern at this point, I mean, I would agree that it's probably an affectation, but my question is, where would it have picked it up? Like, humans were gone by this point, I think, when the robots showed up. And there'd be no reason for androids to be clumsy. We see no indication of clumsiness amongst the androids. And if they model off the aliens, I think
they do trip a lot for androids. Yeah.
Maybe.
Like, you ever run in the sand and then they start to, like, stumble?
That's a good point.
Yeah, and 2B does, like, trip in bushes if you do a full sprint into a bush.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I will say...
Why are you sprinting into bushes?
It was just an accident.
You just have a bush in front of you and you sprint.
I was sprinting and I was going in a straight line, and there happened to be a bush in between me and the place I wanted to go, and I wasn't about turning, because turning's dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out you trip if you run into a bush.
Yeah.
But I think that these machines were not necessarily... They're not clumsy... Like, the clumsiness might not be an affectation as much as a natural consequence of their design.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this particular machine does not have true bipedal legs. It's kind of like a wind-up toy.
It sort of shuffles.
Yeah.
It kind of shuffles. So when you're limited in that way, I don't know that you can be anything but clumsy.
Mm-hmm.
But the love for his brother seems a little bit more of an affectation that it was probably, you would assume, picked up from humanity, right? The remnants of humanity. But it's a really sad scene at the beginning of the game because you can trip and spill the oil, and your machine's super sad when he's like, "Oh, my brother needed that. Now I need to go back and get him more." And then when you finally bring the bucket over to the kind of dead corpse of this robot, he just pours the oil onto its head, and of course nothing happens because the oil is not the key, and this machine just keeps being sad in perpetuity, not making the connection that this robot that he's caring for is dead and not just hurt. So it's kind of this sad scene that starts the game, and the game then pulls out and cuts to 9S, the sidekick from Route A, watching these machines and kind of commenting like, "Silly machine, your brother's dead." And machines don't have feelings anyway. Why are they doing that?
His words are actually like, oil can't make a machine your brother, which seems cold.
Yeah. 9S is very cold early on.
Do you think, this is what Deep Listens is for. I guess I'm not going to provide a caveat here. Do you think there's a religious imagery going on here? Like, I know oil's obviously like a mechanical component, but I mean, it's also an inherently religious one in terms of like chrism and anointing and things like that.
I think it is in other parts of the game. I think the oil here is more of a medicinal metaphor.
Yeah, it's just like motor oil. Yeah.
If it had done something, that might have been a different story.
If it suddenly resurrects the machine, heavenly choirs just break out in the song.
That would have been a twist.
Yeah, but I think that in this case, it's not just motor oil being used in the way motor oil would be used. The machine is treating the motor oil as though it was medicine. And in no other contexts do we see the machine parts being treated as a commodity that a human might use in a similar way. Like, even when you transfer motor oil in some of the like with the missions where you go to the friendly robot village and transfer things between the resistance camp and the friendly village, they always talk about the oil as just like this tool that we need to fix ourselves, but it's a part that we can't manufacture. This is kind of a holistic moment where the machine is finding this fountain of oil and treating it almost like a fountain of water. And like his brother is parched and he just needs water to get back up because he's dehydrated. And treating these substances, it's treating a substance that does not behave in a manner that humans might be familiar with. Like it's almost transmogrifying oil into water mentally, at least in the machine's estimation, from what I could tell. It almost feels like it's dumping water onto its friend's face to wake him up.
Yeah, I see that, but the proper analogy really wouldn't it be oil to blood?
I think it would be blood if what he was doing was trying to, like, I don't know, actually use the oil properly, right? Insert it into the fuel system or into the hydraulic system of his robot buddy. But he's not. He's splashing it on his face. Like, his buddy's asleep and he just needs to wake him up. So I think it's kind of an interesting way that this machine is treating something that is so foreign and mechanical as something that would be more familiar in a human context, but does not operate that way. Does not actually operate that way. It's almost like watching a sitcom, but all of the parts have just been interchanged with a dystopian robot future. And the robot is not aware of that is what's happened.
It's a human action out of context.
Yeah. And by just changing the context, and it's basically like a field of rubble in an abandoned factory, but it's a sequence that feels almost like, someone happening across a wounded soldier on a battlefield or something and trying to do something for them. Or in this case, it's his brother, like finding his brother lying dead, in a forest or something and trying to get him water to wake him up. But it's made somehow sadder and also more ridiculous by transposing the human with machine. And I think that's what they're going for, right?
Yeah, I think that's the general focus of most of the things the game does.
Yeah. take this human moment, juxtapose machines, and see if it still works. And 9S doesn't seem to think so. He finds it pitiful and laughable, ridiculous rather than tragic. Did either of you accidentally end the game immediately after
Yes.
that?
Yep.
No, how?
There's a crane right next to like the starting position, and you have to like lower the crane, and then if you just walk across it, you basically just leave the game, and that's ending G, where basically there's a little summary that's like 9S decided to go, was it live among the robots or study them?
Yeah, he was too interested in the machine, so he abandoned his position and was never seen again.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I accidentally did it because I couldn't find the flight suit early on. I didn't see where it was because it's kind of down a step, and I saw the controls to lower the crane, and so I lowered the crane because most of the times in this game there's only one way to go, and so I thought the crane was going to lead me to the flight suit, and if you just walk like halfway onto the crane, it just rolls credits, and then you have to do the machine sequence again because there's no save point.
Yeah.
That was a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny
silly.
for like a second, and then was a bummer.
And then put you back at the very beginning. Unfortunate.
Yep. But once you get the flight suit, you basically redo the beginning of Route A, but instead now you're controlling 9S. The flight sections play almost identical to the flight sections for 2B, except 9S does not have a sword. And in certain flight modes, 2B can draw a sword and kind of shoot a shockwave. I think it was on the Y button. And 9S has a hacking ability instead. How does hacking play out? And repeat.
So
What'd you think of the hacking?
You basically press on the PS4, it's triangle, and you do it a few times, and then you enter into the robot's mind, where you do a little bullet hell hacking, quote unquote, which most of the time you are dodging bullets, and then there's a central core that you have to blow up, and if you break that, then the hacking ends, and most of the time the thing explodes. Some bigger stuff doesn't. It depends.
Just takes damage sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You only perform hacking like once or twice in Route A. In Route B, you have to do it a bunch. And I found the hacking to be my least favorite thing to control in the whole game. It's sluggish in a way that the rest of the game is not, and it strips away all of your mobility controls, like you can't dodge, you don't have any special abilities, you just basically move and shoot in a true kind of twin-stick shooter fashion, and you have just straight-up slower movement than you do in other versions of the game, in other mini-games even, in this. Like in the flight machine sections, the flight suit sections, you're doing pretty much the same thing in large cases, but you get dodge moves, you have a super attack, you can move pretty quickly to evade bullets, and it felt like hacking was a dumbed down version of the flight suit missions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was happy at this point for really any variety I was going to get, but it very quickly, the novelty wore off.
Yeah, and the very first mission it demands that you hack a few times to kind of tutorialize you on the difference with 9S versus 2B. And you keep all your levels and your equipment from the first run through. So the first enemies, and I found that almost every enemy in this run through was cake, at least on the main line. I had gotten pretty good items and a good amount of money from my first playthrough, so I just was destroying everything in a few hits.
Yep. And the level scale, too, so it's not like they're level 1. They're like around 30, probably where you are, but you still are better equipped than you should be at this stage of the game. So it trivializes a bit. I think I only died once in the entire run through.
Same. And it was because the camera screwed up and I couldn't see my enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So you get through this section. It plays very similarly to the beginning of the 2B section, except there's more flight combat than in the 2B section. Like, there are parts where 9S is doing flight control stuff, and 2B was running around on the ground. So it was actually quicker than the 2B section, than that tutorial. I'd say the big distinction is when you're fighting the giant robot that 2B fights, you're now in a flight suit, so you're shooting at it and hacking and doing the hacking that, as 2B before, you were just kind of seeing happen. And when 9S gets knocked out of the sky, you see that happen. So you're in control of him. And you actually control his pod, like the little robot shooter, and you defend him for a few seconds.
Yeah.
I did actually die doing that because I didn't realize that you could move the pod.
Oh. Yeah. You get movement controls, you can shoot. I don't think you have your, like, big laser at that point.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah. Which would have just made everything even easier. But, yeah, they're robots coming to attack 9S's body that's, like, missing a leg and an arm.
Yeah.
But,
so you basically just run up on them and shoot them. It's not that different from the main game, though this is the only time you get to control just the pod, just the little flying buddy.
yeah.
But it plays similarly to when you're controlling 9S. It's not that big of a difference. It almost feels like a shooting gallery for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So after this, it basically plays like Route A, except you're controlling 9S. And the big distinctions are 9S only holds one weapon instead of two, so you only have one attack button versus the two weapons that you got to kind of combo chain between when you were using 2B. You have hacking instead of a heavy attack, and 9S will do some slightly different moves depending on which weapon he has equipped than what 2B did. 9S seems to do more kind of ranged moves. He will throw weapons more than use them in kind of close quarters combat, which makes him a little bit more annoying to use in some contexts because he won't, chain attacks. He'll sometimes just do a single throw attack instead of a bunch of little slashes or something.
Mm-hmm.
Can we take a second, too, to remind ourselves and the viewers that 9S is in shorts and a schoolboy uniform the whole time? Like, who thought this was a good idea in designing their battle androids?
Well, he is a reconnaissance android, you see.
Oh, excuse me. I apologize.
So he has to blend in with the environment, and we all know that robots they're all going to school, all the robots he's spying on, so he has to blend in.
So you're right. Yeah, it's a sound military strategy when you put it that way.
Yeah, it's basically the desert camo of this world. His schoolboy outfits and blindfolds.
2B isn't exactly dressed for the part either.
Do you mean to tell me that you don't fight in high heels constantly?
Not if I can help it.
I mean, it's good for developing your calves, but that would be more
true.
like a training exercise, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Well, maybe the window in her dress is to distract the robot opponents and then cut them when they're staring.
That's it. The panning shots are really just combat strategy.
Yeah, she's seducing these robots to death. Yeah, so the outfits continue to be ridiculous. They don't get any better when you're controlling 9S.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find any of the combat differences between 9S and 2B to be significant, or did you mostly just play the game exactly the same?
I was pretty much still just hacking and slashing. Like, at no point is this like a intense technical combat experience. Maybe when you're fighting, what's the guy's name? Father. Who's the martial arts robot?
Oh. I don't
martial
even
arts
remember.
robot? Adam?
Yeah.
Eve?
No, there's a
guy on a building. He's on a rooftop, and every time you fight him, you like bring him new parts, and he upgrades himself over and over again. It's basically just a fetch quest with a battle attached to the end.
Wait, is there someone who's like, the guy from Threads of Fate, the weaponsmith?
Oh yeah, the dude with the two stupid swords.
Yeah, the guy with the swords. Oh,
Yeah,
what's his name?
That game you made us play. Right,
Character
right.
of the
That's
Year
on.
runner-up.
Yeah.
And by runner-up, I mean he was nominated. And it's an honor to be nominated. Rod the Blade Star.
That's it. The Blade Star. How can I forget the Blade Star? Yeah, he's basically a robot Blade Star.
He's Robot Rod the Blade Star? Man, I missed out on a good mission then. Fuck. Okay, fine. Maybe I'll have to check that out. Does he have a charming personality? This character who you beat the shit out of?
I mean, he's very sort of like he's basically like a sensei, like a guru, but like 9S and 2B aren't really looking for a sensei, so he's sort of forcing his witticisms on them. He's fine.
Okay. That's pretty good. I prefer the cocky wit of Rod the Blade Star, but that's fine.
I didn't even do any side quests in this run.
I didn't either, and I found that dodging enemies was much easier in this one because 9S seems to be slightly faster. It's either he's faster or some of the chips that I used that increased my speed. I just noticed it more in this run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had like move speed +5 or something, so I just zipped past everything mostly.
Yeah, that's definitely a big change. I just overtly ignored most enemies in this run-through. So how far do you go before there's a change between the 9S run and the 2B run? I guess you have a different operator than 2B did, and this operator is slightly more cold than the operator who talks to 2B. 2B's operator is much more needy. 9S's operator is a lot more standoffish. Though you eventually start getting emails from her, and she's like, maybe you should call me for diagnostics, or maybe you should just call me to call me.
Yeah, she seems to get a little bit like warmer as she goes, but I still liked 2B's operator better with her and her boy problems.
Yeah, her and her relationship issues were pretty entertaining. It felt like the beginning of this game, other than some of the odd cutscenes you'd occasionally see, and 9S, it's not like these cutscenes were blended into the game. You would just kind of get dropped into a little theater, and 9S would just narrate over some description of like a character or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're like cutouts that you sometimes see at weird places, seemingly like out of nowhere most of the time.
Yeah, very strange sort of moments. Do you think 9S is aware of these? Like, do you think he's actually seeing them, or they just needed a voice to narrate?
I think it's him. So at least my interpretation of it is this felt out of place in a way that would make sense if it was 9S in the future, like when he's a robot deity or something, telling his other robots or telling kids and teaching them the ways of robots from before, almost like their little fairy tales. Kind of explaining the way that other machines failed or lived their lives as a kind of parable.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely view this as a moment of sort of cultural transmission, which would fit into the sort of paradigm of robotic evolution that seems to be going on throughout the story. Like, there's always that claim that humanity has escaped evolution, at least in terms of like biology, but we're still undergoing cultural evolution through like narrative, things being handed down and whatnot. So this could be the moment where the robots transition from basically what was a cyclical society into one that changes and develops thanks to their new cultural apparatus.
Yeah, and it's not just an apparatus that's consuming human culture, it's starting to produce its own, which is nice. And I noticed that it was generally before a boss fight or after a boss fight, you'd get these little parables that seem to line up with the bosses that you just fought. Like when you fight Adam the first time and you encounter the first tribe, you kind of get a cutscene that talks about how these machines like started to adopt different things that they cared about. Like some people cared about love, some people cared about hate, like all these different things. And it really, I think, shined when you encountered the ballerina robot from the first game. Because in the first game, when you encounter her, she just kind of screams at you, and this is kind of in the theme park. You battle her. She has a bunch of androids that she's kind of enslaved and put on giant crucifixes, and they start attacking you with hacking and stuff. And 2B doesn't get to see the names of any of these enemies, but 9S does. And 2B doesn't necessarily think about who these characters were. But in this battle, 9S gets to see some cutscenes relating to who these robots were before they started fighting you. And that adds a lot of valuable insight into who they were. What did you think of the ballerina story?
It was certainly interesting. I mean, so her whole quest is to get beautiful, to win the heart of the particular. Is it Sartre?
It's John Paul.
It's John Paul. Yeah. Okay. So to win the heart of Sartre, who doesn't really seem to be interested in anybody, so it's sort of a fruitless endeavor. But she goes through all these augmentations and eventually gets to the point where she hears this legend that if you eat an android, you get everlasting beauty. So she starts eating androids. I think she eats robots and stuff too.
Yeah, she eats anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically whatever she can get her hands on, sort of this desperate quest for beauty. I mean, it was, I'm going to say pathetic, but I don't mean pathetic in the sort of like traditional sense. I mean, like it drew on pathos. Mm-hmm. It was an interesting story. I just had a lot of sort of aesthetic questions. Like, how is robotic beauty determined? Where did they get these standards of beauty? How are these legends advancing? I had a lot of questions, but I guess the fact that I'm asking these questions indicates my growing interest in these robots as like culture, so to speak.
Yeah, but I think that they even say during the cutscene itself that this robot looked up. She found she traveled to the top of a mountain to retrieve a gem because apparently human ballerina, like these beautiful people in human society, would wear jewels. So she traveled to the top of a mountain, like losing many parts, getting damaged to get this gem, and she adorned herself with the gem, thinking that that would make her beautiful. And the robots, John Paul's like, nah, it's beauty is what you are, or some philosophical gibberish. And then she's like, okay, I need to become more beautiful. Then she starts thinking about, ballerinas were apparently these incredibly beautiful people. I'm going to add more parts to myself to make myself more beautiful. And she does that by like ripping parts off of other machines. And then she tries eating androids. Then she adorns herself with the bodies of androids. Then she learns how to sing because she believed that singing was appealing. And she's learning all of this from humanity, from the leftover bits of human literature. And so she's evaluating her beauty by a standard set by a species that is not her own, right? And so it's an impossible standard to meet on multiple levels. But also it's one that she's not being judged by the person she's trying to get attention from. So it's a futile act in multiple directions. And I thought it really worked as like this tragic moment for this character kind of being dropped into this world, given some degree of autonomy and self-awareness, but not having all the contextual grounding, not having the education, not having a culture to draw upon. So she kind of cobbles her own together out of the refuse of the culture. Her culture was kind of built at the top without realizing that key differences between herself and the people she's learning from make her assumptions invalid. And I think you even see that with some of the other machines that talk to John Paul. They're covered in makeup and other things, that kind of remnants of humanity that make little sense outside of the fact that I guess this dude's real hot and they all want to appeal to him. He does have a top hat.
He does have a top hat. It is very fancy. It is, too. I wouldn't say cool. It's an intriguing parallel to basically the way white Western beauty standards have sort of colonized the world, to the point where like robotic beauty obviously shouldn't be based on human beauty, and sort of applying these standards inherently devalues anything that could be considered inherently robotic, in the same way that sort of Western cultural hegemony has perpetuated sort of white standards of beauty to the point that anything else becomes similarly devalued.
Yeah. Go ahead, Em.
No, you go for it.
No, all I was going to say is, yeah, once you apply one standard of beauty to across, in this case, it's cross species, pretty much.
Yeah.
And there aren't even, like, the people who set those standards of beauty, the humans that created these standards, don't even exist to explain them or don't even exist to uphold them. And so now you've got kind of hearsay of hearsay of hearsay continuing to trickle down through generations. And this machines lives for, it seems like hundreds of years trying to understand something that they cannot and can never achieve. And it basically drives this machine mad and makes her homicidal. And she tries to kill you because she wants to be more beautiful.
Is she homicidal?
Well, she wants to kill you.
Well, right, but no, I mean, this is just sort of a pedantic Latin question. Is homicidal would be killing people. So she might be androidicidal, but I don't think the Latin or the Romans had a term for androids.
She wants to kill robots too.
Sidle.
Yeah, machinicidal.
Machinicidal. Let's trademark that. That's ours now.
Yep. Writing that down.
Excellent.
Building the brand.
Mm-hmm. So we do learn that her name is Simone.
Yeah.
Pete, do you know the philosopher, feminist, theorist? I can't pronounce her last name. Simone de Beauvoir?
Simone de Beauvoir.
Who also had a tumultuous relationship with, I want to say, I have to fact check it, but I want to say with Sartre, right? In real life?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that did not go well then either.
Yeah.
What was it?
Let's see if we can find.
I didn't even think that she was named after Simone de Beauvoir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that either until M pointed out, but it's interesting. I mean, especially considering, what a famous feminist philosopher was. She wrote The Second Sex, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like a famous work of feminist scholarship. Interesting. Anybody should read it. Really, it's been a long time since I have.
Yeah, it has been a long time for me too.
Yeah, I don't know enough about her work to know what the reference is here, but I just found it interesting because her and Sartre did not have a good relationship by the sound of it, and he was going around basically getting a lot of lovers and not paying them any mind and doing all of this theory, which seems to be reflected in the actual game. I don't know if you can speak on it. I was curious.
So I know her stuff is, if I remember correctly, is largely sort of definitional. That like the female has been, I mean, it's there in the name, right? Female is just male plus pho. You know what I mean? So like everything's defined in terms of the male. So the female is an absence or a lack as opposed to a presence in and of herself. Honestly, I think this is sort of like another Pascal situation.
Yeah.
Where they're sort of like throwing out philosophers' names and they happen to stumble upon two who are actually in a real life tumultuous relationship. I don't think it has that much to do with Beauvoir's thought in general.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the relationship, it's a shout out to their relationship, but the actual philosophy, if there is any to be espoused by the Simone character in the game, does not reflect the second sex or definitional feminism. The character in the game is basically trying to attain beauty at any cost and then is driven mad by it, and that's all we get of this character. We don't really get much of the interiority here except her drive towards beauty. And so, you don't have to use the background or biography of the people whose names you're referencing, but I like it as a little shout out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's nice, and I mean this fits in with the sort of overall question, at least as I perceive it, of the game itself, right? Like these robots are now basically purposeless, So, all right, you need to establish your own purpose. What do you do? And Simone just happened to settle on pursuing beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it leads her to tangle with 2B and 9S, and they don't fucks around.
Yeah.
So you chop her up and explode her. Oh, another thing, in this section of the game, you have the hacking power, so there are a bunch of chests that in your first playthrough you could not open, and now 9S can open them, because he can hack them open. And all the chests that you opened as 2B are still open, which raises the question, do you think that the second playthrough is actually happening sequentially after the first playthrough, and it is the same world?
There are also some side quests from the first one that reappear. Like when you go to the village, there's a pair of siblings who you helped one of them like come back to the village from the desert, and then they were still there when I went back in the second playthrough. They're like, "Thank you for helping me." I was like, "That's weird," because it doesn't seem like they would mess that up.
Yeah, and 2B and 9S, you get reactions from Anemone, the leader of the Resistance, where she talks to you as if she is already very familiar with who you are.
Yeah.
Like the first time you run into them, she seems very familiar with you.
It's not outside the realm of possibility. I mean, there are like cycles within cycles in this game. Like everything largely seems to be repeating itself.
Yeah, so I'm gonna guess that this game is like those hacked chests, and there are even some chests in this playthrough that you open, but then it says there's a machine part in here, you don't really want it, and then you close the chest. Mm-hmm. So it seems like the world is actually getting modified every time this loop gets reset. So I'm expecting that by the time we get to ending C, D, and beyond, they will explain that this world is looping over and over again because reasons.
Yeah, I mean, there's also an interesting question just because we know that they can reset themselves for all intents and purposes, which 9S and 2B came through here. If it's the ones we have or if it was some different one that came before them.
Yeah, and I expect that they'll keep kind of raising that question as we play through the game. So after this section, you can go to the Friendly Robot Village again. It's the same basically as the first time, though this time I accidentally punched Pascal instead of started talking to him the first time I saw him, and then he exploded.
Oh, like immediately?
Like straight up, like he's just like, nope, enough.
Just one hit, exploded, and then I couldn't continue the game.
Oh. Is that a fail state?
It didn't give me a fail state. I just couldn't. It had a mission icon where Pascal once was.
Oh.
Except they were too exploded to talk to me.
So you just have to sift through like the ashes on the ground, like hope they left a note or something.
I tried. I was like, I'm going to walk over here, see if they respawn. They did not respawn, which leads me to question whether you can just like murder every robot in the Friendly Robot Village and if that's a fail state.
I think so.
I one-punch manned Pascal, and that was funny and then not funny because I hadn't saved for like 10 minutes.
Oh, no.
And I had to redo like a whole section. So that was a bummer. But section with Pascal is exactly the same. You run back to the Resistance Village, you drop off items, then you go fight these giant robots that are making their way towards the center of the city. You fight them in a very similar way to the first time you fought them. And in this section, it's even like exactly the same because 9S and 2B were together. You go down into the exposed center of the city after the robots get there. Then, do you have the section with the king?
Yeah, you fight Adam and Eve. After that,
Right, Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
you go down and you find the robot, the alien mothership. That's the same.
Mm-hmm. And after that, I think it is the king, and that's the same.
It's worth mentioning, I guess, after Adam and Eve get revealed, you do get some scenes where Adam and Eve are just kind of sitting at a table discussing things, and Adam is talking about how they're going... Eve's like, why are we eating fruit? We're robots. We don't need to eat fruit. And Adam's
why are we wearing clothes?
Yeah,
why are we
wearing clothes?
Why is my name a girl's name?
He does ask that.
Why are we reading books? Isn't it faster to just download stuff?
He's always asking, too, if they can go play.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what Adam and Eve do when they go play. Like, it seems like they kill things. I don't know.
Oh.
Well, it seems like Eve is really childlike and is just wants to play, just wants to spend time with his older brother. And Adam has this high-minded philosophical drive to be more human-like. And he's kind of dragging Eve along. And Eve is not picking up anything.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, he just wants to play. And that kind of drive seems to be the central tension between the two, but we don't, like, other than seeing these few moments, we don't see much of their relationship, right? It's like 3 cutscenes and then the battles you have against them, that's still it.
Yeah, this is really where they're, like, we find out who they are as people / not people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not very much. They're just kind of funny, having these almost slapstick moments where it's like, why are we eating fruit when we're robots?
Mm-hmm.
We eat fruit because humans became smart by eating fruit. Okay, I guess I'll eat fruit. Why are we wearing pants? Because humans covered their junk with garments.
Yeah.
Why wasn't he just like, yeah, but we don't have junk. Like, we are not anatomically correct.
We're Ken's down there, brother. Yeah, I don't know.
Do they understand that?
Yeah, I think very clearly.
Mm.
Adam says they covered their genitals.
They get that, but do they understand that they are not anatomically correct?
Oh, that's a good question. Does he say genitals? Is that the actual dialogue?
I think so.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Whoever did that translation job, excellent work.
Yeah, it's these sequences are weird. They're almost slapstick. They're set in these almost diorama-looking environments where they're sitting at a table opposite each other in, like, the void, wherever they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. So after you go, you find the robot, you find the alien crash site, then you go to the kingdom. And I thought the kingdom section, it was probably my favorite of the learning the backstories of these robots sections.
Oh, yeah.
I avoided all of the robots in the kingdom section. I killed like one this time because they're slow and dumb.
Yeah.
They yell at you and they like go into formation still. And my 9S is just too fast. And eventually when you make your way toward, as you kind of get through the forest, you get some cutscenes showing what happened, what caused this kingdom to spring up. And why don't you explain what caused this kingdom?
Yeah, so basically there was a robot who was one of these large ones
These big
who
boys.
decided, yeah, he's a big boy. They decided they were going to break off from the network and make their own little kingdom, basically, as it sounds.
Yeah, and the rationale is we're in a forest. Machines are not meant to be in a forest. It is too hot here. I want to make a better world for us.
Mm-hmm. So they decide we're now a kingdom. I am the king, and they hunker down for a while. And then later on, you find out that the king has died, and they put the brain or the memory or whatever a robot has into a child robot, which is the little baby that they are protecting, that they were protecting in Route A. Is there any more motivation behind that? It's just...
Yeah, I like... So, in the beginning, they... Like, the king, he makes his kingdom, and the robots don't know what a kingdom is. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't know what any of that means, and so he's like, we'll live together, like a family.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, we're into that. And he rules them, and then he, breaks down over time. They put his mind into this baby robot, and they're like, we'll raise him. He'll grow up, and then he'll be our new king.
Yep. Robots don't grow up.
That's the thing. So they learned about kingdoms seemingly from a what's the bloodline lineage? What's the term for rulership that's passed down?
Primogeniture.
Primogenitor. So they're used to primogenitori?
Yeah, I would just say
Primogenitive?
primogenitor is the noun.
Yeah, they're used to that sort of monarchy. Or that seems to be what they've learned. And so they put the mind of their king into a baby, thinking that it will grow up to become the new king. But they're robots, so it will never grow. And they realize this like 100 years later, that the robot king hasn't grown at all.
They realize it literally 4 hours before you show up to slaughter them all, basically.
Yeah, they say 4 hours before. There's a robot on the outskirts, and our king hasn't grown at all. But he's so cute. He's so lil.
Mm-hmm.
We love him. He's a real cutie.
It was funny.
And I love, they're like, what do we do now? I don't know. We're too stupid.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do.
They literally say we are too stupid to figure that out.
So basically they try to mimic human society similar to Simone, but they don't have the context. They don't understand everything. They're mimicking something that they have no familiarity with, and therefore the differences between them and a human cause a fatal flaw in their evaluation. They think that we must put the mind of the king into a baby so that it can grow to be the new king, but robots don't grow, so this is a doomed plan. But because they don't know anything else, they keep going with the plan even though it's impossible. It's fascinating, those two sections, I thought. And I love this family.
Yeah.
Like, I love these dum-dums in the forest. They're my favorite. Like, calling people into formation, and then they're charging at you with spears, and you're shooting bullets and lasers at them. It's great. They're riding on robot horses in this stupid forest, and they're just flying at you one at a time to die because they're terrible fighters. They might be the worst fighters in the whole game, and they don't get any better when you're fighting them with 9S.
No, they're awful.
Yep.
They're just like, for our king, go.
Sacrifice yourself for our king.
Sacrifice, die for him, because we won't kill for him.
And then they do.
And then they do. They die so quickly.
Yep.
But this time I spared them. I just avoided them as best I could. And after this section, you get kind of the story of the king, and 9S will give the parable of this family that loved its king. And then you fight A2? Or
A2 shows up, kills the king, and then you fight her, and then she leaves.
It's the same. And it's the same.
Bounces. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is you get to hear 9S talking to the operator to report that they didn't catch A2. But the other side of the dialogue is not informative enough to where I felt like I was playing a different experience for those sections. But after this is where you kind of get the big break between 9S and 2B, because you go to this big battle where you're fighting a giant sea monster thing that kind of attacks a carrier, and this time you're controlling 9S, and you kind of separate a few more times in this fight, and it kind of culminates in 9S using a missile to blow up this giant machine, but the missile exploding causes him to get kind of knocked into the clutches of Adam and Eve. And I did like the parable for the giant sea monster. They say that the giant sea monster was put at the bottom of the ocean because he was unwanted by other machines, and so he grew lonely and sad.
And it was just calling for its mother.
And it was just calling mama, mama, mama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's an interesting psychology at work here. Like isolation. It's like solitary confinement, right? It's basically recognized as torture everywhere in the world but here, because being isolated slowly drives somebody insane. But like, again, I guess the question would be, what is it in the hardware or software of the robot that creates a similar need for companionship? Like, why is this there?
Mm-hmm.
And the game in these two playthroughs, I don't think fully explains it. It explains that this is a thing that keeps happening, but not why. But we do know that these machines are horny, these machines get lonely, these machines want companionship, but we don't know why. Other than, I mean, I hope the answer is just because all living things do.
Hmm.
and they're
Are
alive.
they fulfilling the hierarchy of needs?
Ooh,
Like,
that's a good question. Like they're just going up Maslow's pyramid.
yeah.
Maybe. I forget. Do you remember the order? I can look it up.
Let's see. Let's
I mean,
bring that up.
isn't it food, shelter, are like the first two?
So
Hierarchy of
it's,
needs.
I got them. So physiological needs are the first one. So it's, yeah, food, shelter, things like that, which robots, I mean, I guess oil and energy, maybe. Next one's
Mhm.
safety needs, like nobody's going to stab you to death, which they're getting stabbed to death all the time. Third is love and belonging. So that would probably be where this fish monster is at,
Mhm.
right? He's not really getting his love and belonging. The next is esteem, right? Do you get respect? Do you have your own self-esteem? Do people like you? And the last one's self-actualization. Are you maximizing your potential as an individual?
Mhm.
Well, I think that actually fits with what 2B, 9S kind of encounters with Adam and Eve, because Adam is kind of trying to wrestle with self-actualization. And he decides that hatred, destruction is the key to being human, and so he must mimic it.
Yeah.
So he kind of comes to a high-minded philosophical reason to be a sociopath.
Sure.
So what did you think of the section where 9S is kind of rebooting himself and he's on the machine network? And you kind of start stumbling across different bits of information about the machines.
Is that where he starts arguing with, I guess it's Adam in this case?
Well, he starts by just learning about the machines. Like, they came
Mhm.
online from the aliens. They have, in some cases, they start learning about humanity, and they keep repeating these human structures, but they always fail. And once they fail, they always fail the same way, and they never improve or change. So if a machine, like, they start developing society, and once a machine decides to have a tech, a monarchy or a theocracy, once they decide it, they start on a path, and then they will eventually come to a downfall that's entirely predictable based on kind of human existence. But then they won't improve it. They'll just reproduce it again. And they just keep reproducing it over and over and over again. The exact same way. Which we've seen in these other characters, right? Like,
Yeah.
Simone tries to attain beauty, and so she just keeps going to greater and greater lengths to attain beauty, but none of it ever succeeds because there's a fatal flaw. And then he finds Adam on the network, and Adam tells him that 9S is actually selfish and terrible and bad and horny.
Mhm.
Yeah, which we already knew, obviously, from the ending of Run 1.
Clearly.
Yeah, he says, 2B, you probably want to fuck her right now, don't you?
Well, it's asterisk. He doesn't actually say it, but
Rated
we
T for teen.
interpreted it.
There's nothing T for teen about this game.
Yeah, I think it got it. M for mature.
This is, I mean, let's go back to the culture point you were making earlier, Gino. That's sort of the robots are just adopting human culture. So as a result, they're caught in this cycle because they just keep doing the same things they've gotten from us over and over again. So the key to breaking it is cultural evolution through an establishment of a uniquely robotic culture, which hopefully happens soon, because human culture hasn't seemed to work out so great for them.
Totally.
More for us, really.
And because we've played this game twice, and I don't want it to do it again. I want a different thing.
It's forcing you to experience it in the same way that robots are. They have to
Yes.
repeat it over and over again, so now you have to.
Welcome
I
to
think the
your
game is doing that.
Sisyphean hell.
I think the game is legitimately doing that. It is trying to do that to make you see these same moments the same
Bad
way.
point.
Yep, it's a point that it's making, but I think there are more elegant ways to do that. I don't think you need to spend 20 hours or whatever making this point, but it did. So you beat Adam, or I guess 2B beats Adam. You get set free. And then you're back with 2B. Oh, you're not back with 2B again. You get shipped up to the base. And when you get shipped up to the base, 9S is kind of in disrepair, and you hack into the base's hard drive and server, and you start rooting around in all the server information for the mothership that kind of dispatches you on your missions. And in this case, you learn that some of the shipping logs that were sent to the moon, where ostensibly the last remnants of humanity are, have been empty, like they're shipping nothing, and that some of like 9S and 2B's record logs are a little odd. And then you eventually learn that, what is the acronym for 9S and 2B's military organization?
Yorha.
Do we ever find out what that's an acronym for?
Not yet. But we learned that Yorha created the Human Council, the Council of Humanity, instead of the Council of Humanity created Yorha, which raises the question, what happened? Is humanity even alive? I thought Yorha was supposed to come after them, but if they came before, then what happened? How would the council be created by androids? That makes no sense if humans exist and that's who we're fighting for. And when you get caught hacking into the main mainframe, nothing happens at first. But then you have to help 2B kind of escape the cult that she runs into, and that's the theocracy you see at the end of the game. And unlike in the first playthrough and in the earlier battles against bosses, this one you don't get to learn anything about the theocracy. You just kind of jump in on it and then just murder everyone. Which is like, oh, I guess these people didn't deserve a redeeming story.
No, they weren't cool like the Knights were.
No, this one's just a death cult. It is what it looked like.
There's no subtext here. It's all text.
Yep.
But you this is a kind of a cool section because you hack into enemy robots and assume direct control of them instead of just blowing them up. Though you can blow them up. And that lets you kind of have different control experiences for the first time.
It's neat.
Yeah. Other than controlling the robot with the machine gun arm, I found all of them to be just worse controlling versions of the main characters.
Yep. I don't think they were meant to be, like, better. You just pick the biggest one and then you go.
Yeah. But once you've finished the battles, you kind of get to the final section where 9S has to turn off the lights, which lets you hack into the factory itself. And that lets you access some of the files that are in the factory. Did you find any of the random files that are hidden there?
Oh, yeah. I went around and I found all of them.
So what was going on in the factory?
So it was something about a Project Gestalt. I don't remember the specifics of like what went down there. I know that that's a reference to an old Nier game, but I don't know. I haven't played it. So, do you know what happened there?
No, I mean, it seemed like they were it said that they were studying like sick humans and stuff and trying to make machine it seemed like they were making machine replicas or like copying human intelligence into machine bodies or something. Mm-hmm. It seemed bad. And the word gestalt is an organized whole that's perceived as more than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's a psychological term.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gestalt psychology. That was Jung, right?
I don't know.
Founders. Let's see. Gestalt, philosophy of the mind. It's an attempt to understand the laws behind the ability to acquire and maintain meaningful perceptions in an apparently chaotic world. Huh. Seems a little on the nose, but sure.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they were just trying to build new people. So, like, how do we translate the blueprint into a new medium? Take the Gestalt.
Kurt Kafka was the founder.
Really? Mm-hmm. What was Jung?
So this was, its roots were Hume, Goethe, Kant, Harley, and Mach. But yeah, I don't see Jung in here.
Yeah, I'm off then. Whatever.
Whatever. I mean, I'm just hoping that this results in another sequence like Bionic Commando, where it turns out that they were jellifying people and turning them into the robots. I hope the robots are made of people.
Oh, damn. That'd be a twist.
That's my only hope at this point. Because it's all of the records from Project Gestalt at this point seemed too vague to necessarily 100% understand, but it seemed like the sort of thing that if you were going to play through another playthrough, you might learn about.
Or if you're going to play Nier Gestalt, which is a PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 game, that might give you some answers.
Yeah. But
we're not going to do that.
But we're not going to do that because it's a bad game. Yeah. So once you've finished hacking and helping 2B escape from the Death Cult, the commander of Yorha finds you, she noticed that you hacked into the main server, and she just says, "Oh, if you want to, well, I guess I'll just tell you everything." And she gives you the file that explains everything about Yorha. Did y'all read the file?
I don't know if I read it or not. She tells you, like, straight up.
Yeah, she's not hiding anything, really.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's dead.
Mm-hmm. There's no humans on the moon. They made it up to give the robots a purpose. Or the androids, rather.
Yeah, basically, you're working in a giant military-industrial complex. They are creating a forever war to give forever purpose to ageless, undying machines.
Yep.
Yeah, that's again the focus, right? Like, what do you do when you have to create your own purpose? And the response was, well, we won't. We'll just keep the purpose the humans gave us in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But there isn't really. I mean, did the humans even give them that purpose? Like,
I mean, it
seemed
seems
like
it, right?
Yorha was kicked off like right before the humans died out, but it seems like that was also before the robots even showed up, the machines. The war with the machines seemed to start after all of humanity died, as just a pretext for giving the androids something to do. So it's a forever war where the machines and the androids both can survive indefinitely without fighting. There's no reason. There's no scarcity. There's no reason for them to fight outside of creating meaning for both sides. And that seems to be enough for each of them. Though some of the machines don't seem to have any free will or ability to stop fighting, like they are being commanded directly to fight, but the Yorha robots are all being directed solely, I guess, to stop them from trying to find their own meaning? Just to give them form and shape and control?
Yeah, I mean, is it like that Yorha wants to maintain control? Because, like, they have nothing really to gain from it either. Like, the reason for the military-industrial complex is profit, and profit doesn't really matter to androids, I think.
Yeah, and here's another thing where we're asking questions that I'm sure endings 7 through 12 will give us explanations for in painstaking detail, but right now it's just cryptic. Though the commander does say that her purpose is to give, is like, Nina's like, why are you telling me all this? And she's like, I want to create a god worth dying for?
Something like that.
And the thing that that 9S hears from the kind of mind of the death cult, he hears from the commander. Like, the death cult's phraseology is replicated by Yorha directly.
Mm-hmm.
So, implying that they are a death cult, or they were the death cult. So, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's all very opaque, and there's room for interpretation, but I have a feeling that if we just keep playing, it'll just tell us.
Probably. It doesn't seem to be hiding very much. Like, when it gets to it, it'll tell you everything.
Yeah, they're like, if you haven't put the pieces together yet, don't worry, we got it. We're
gonna
build
put
this
them
puzzle
together
for you.
Yeah. And then from here, you go back to the planet, to Earth, you fight Eve, you kill him, and once you kill Eve, again, 9S gets corrupted. And in this case, when you're hacking Eve, you can kind of see 9S getting corrupted. And I like how they represent that visually. Like, they show the hacking space that you've entered kind of getting all messed up and having shapes and stuff that didn't make sense, or it looks like the world is falling apart a little bit. And Eve's kind of even more pathetic or sad when you're in his mind hacking him. He basically keeps saying, like, my brother was all I needed in the world. Like, I would have been happy. Just if you just let me have my brother. That was all I needed. I was happy. Why did you take him from me? And when you're 2B, he's shouting at you, screaming, brother, and, you know, why'd you kill my brother? But he's more articulate when you're hacking him. And you eventually kind of get to a section of his memory where it's just him and his brother at that table where all of their cutscenes happened. And he's just replaying the time that they had together over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's sad.
Yeah, these are all cool things. These are all cool scenarios, but I don't know, the philosophy seems overdone.
Yeah, it's certainly overwrought. And I mean, it's all the cool stuff is wrapped up in such dumb presentation. Like the blindfolds and the stupid uniforms. Yorha. Like, I like the questions they're asking. I just don't seem like this is the right way to answer them.
I mean, is it worth just discussing the anime aesthetic that's going on here? Because I think a lot of the complaints that we're having is just a anime style of storytelling that I'm currently watching Neon Genesis Evangelion, and it seems to line up with this game in a lot of ways.
Netflix now.
Yep. How
It's
far
just on
into
Netflix.
it did you get?
I'm on episode 16.
Okay.
I'm on episode 4. Don't ruin anything.
All right.
I'm not going to ruin anything, and I've been
finished
listening.
it, and we'll talk about it. Maybe we'll have a special episode on that.
Yeah, I've been listening to
Sure.
Waypoint's
Yeah.
podcasts on Neon Genesis Evangelion, which everyone should check out. I mean, if you're listening to our show, you probably know about their show, but
Yeah.
Waypoint Radio, they're doing a great read through. There's no way that we will have as much coverage of Evangelion, even if we did an episode on it, because they just did a 4-hour episode on
Oh, jeez.
4 episodes. So we're never going
Jesus.
to go that deep. I don't think.
God bless them for doing that work.
Yeah.
It's a
All power to
service. Mhm.
But I think that the anime aesthetic kind of keeps coming up, and I'm someone who, outside of Evangelion, I've watched One Punch Man, season 1.
Season 2 just ended.
I know, but I don't want to see season 2 because I thought season 1 worked just fine, and I didn't want that show to continue. I thought it worked as a nice critique and send up of the shonen kind of fighting storyline, and a sequel, I think, defeats the ridiculousness of season 1. Like, it just kept escalating and escalating and escalating, and then it got to what I thought was the logical endpoint of where the escalation could be. And if you have a season 2, then you have to come up with weird bullshit. It can't have that premise anymore. It needs to have more story. It's like a Kingdom Hearts problem. You used up all the story, and now you have to make up new premises so that you can have these characters keep doing things.
They sort of solve it by relegating Saitama's side character status, but
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I want him to be the main character because he's awesome.
It's wild, the route that they go, where it's just like, and then he shows up at the very end and he punches something, but you went through 7 chapters of him just riding his bike or something.
They're just gaming. He plays a lot of games this season.
Exactly. I don't know.
So it is like a Kingdom Hearts situation. We've got a lot of Organization 13 doing stuff. It's like, what's Sora up to? He's in an egg getting his memories rebuilt.
Yeah. We've established the ultimate badass, and that's a problem for actual continual story. So let's just throw him in a drawer and forget about him.
Yeah, for a while now, Goku's going to be training in the hyperbolic time chamber. So you're going to have to care about Goten for a bit. And that's just... Those are always the lame parts of these shows. And let's get back to the moment at hand, because I think the overwrought and over-acronymed storytelling, the focus on these large confrontations and battles, the emphasis of, these character designs and styles and looks, and a lot of vocabulary and jargon. All of those things are very common in anime storytelling. And having these loops, even these loops, like these narrative loops that look very similar but have slight variations that are supposed to be important. Like I think about in Yu Yu Hakusho, for example, the tournament storyline.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And the tournament is always a framing narrative that I think it comes up in that show like 3 or 4 different times.
That's the only thing they do, is it's just like journeys to other tournaments.
It's journeys to tournaments, and then the tournament will have slightly different characters who are participating in it, and because of the different characters being in it, now there's a different meaning to the entire tournament. And someone's going to get a new ability, and it's going to be awesome. But in this case, it's like the tournament is this level, or this game structure. You're going to walk through it, and it will be the same. But because of slight variations in what the game tells you, you're supposed to take different meaning away. And it's really just... it feels overwrought. It feels bathed in this overdone aesthetic, right? That I don't find compelling unto itself. I'm not really ride or die for the anime storytelling constraints.
I mean, I like them, just not in the context of like these sort of heavy-hitting ontological and metaphysical questions. It just doesn't mesh well.
Mm.
Like that's why I like Yu Yu Hakusho. Like there's nothing going on in that show. It's just badass anime fights. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, and I guess it's just the moments where you have to go, and it feels almost like in Bleach when they explain about spirit pressure, or they explain about the nature of their swords or something. And
The
they'll just spend...
Zanpakuto, show a little respect. Come on.
Sorry. When they spend a bunch of time explaining the very specific dogma of their world and the technical differences between each sword and the levels of power that you need to attain, and it just... I know what they're getting at. I know what the general concept is, but the specifics that you're explaining only pertain to your fictional universe, and they don't translate anywhere else. Like when they're talking about Yorha and the aliens and all of that stuff, unless it's going to be revealed that all of this is bullshit that was made up, in which case, like, why did you put me through it in the first place? I don't care about all of the artifice. It's at least not enough to do it twice or 3 times or however many times. What do you think?
I mean, I can only be entertained for so long by panty shots. Like eventually I do want something, slightly heavier.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I sort of know where this is going, so I don't want to say too much. I think Route C is the one that we want to really look at, but we're not there yet. This is still in the, setup phase.
How do you have setup phase for fucking 20 hours?
Yeah, I know. It's we haven't even gotten to the title screen yet, basically.
What? Excuse me?
You heard me.
They had a trailer at the end of Route B, and the ending of Route B is very similar to Route A. The only difference is when 2B chokes 9S out, there's 2 ghostly silhouettes of the 2 red-haired girls from Route 1, or Route A, just kind of watching you choke 9S out.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of it is the same. But once you get to the end of the credits, it plays like a next time on Nier Automata, or Automata, and it cuts to all these sequences of characters who barely had any run in the first 2 playthroughs.
Stuff we haven't even seen before.
Yeah. Characters we've never seen before. Like, characters who appeared once and then ran away, and now apparently they're going to be key. Which, of course they were. But who tells stories like this?
Yoko Taro.
Yoko Taro does. And anime does.
Yep.
Pete, what do you think? Are you furious also?
I've been furious pretty much the whole time, but that was like a philosophical fury. At this point, I'm more annoyed that, like, they're still doing this, I guess. Right? Like, it's still happening.
Yeah, it's... We're going to keep playing. We'll play Route C, and if Route C brings us around, we'll probably play Route D. But you really... I can't stress this enough as a person who writes. You can't expect this much buy-in from your user base. I would never expect them to tolerate as much nonsense. And I think that maybe there's just a lot of faith in RPG fans or anime fans that they will tolerate a lot of setup bullshit to have a good payoff.
Yeah. It's a lot to ask in any medium, I think. And Nier didn't even have like a big fan base. So I don't know what they were banking on when they made this. It's wild.
This has just been a heat check from top to bottom. Like, they were just shooting their shot.
Yeah. They got a lot of money, and they were like, all right, here it is. We're just going to put everything into it.
What do we call the robots? Yorha. That's a great...
What does that mean?
Nobody
Fucking
cares.
who cares?
Can we capitalize it real weird, too? Yep, absolutely.
Sure.
Of course you should. What if we put the little
Capitalize
robot...
it 3 times.
What if we put the little robot head from Nier in a robot? And then he just, like, runs away. Yeah! Just do it!
Give him blindfolds. Fuck it.
Fuck it. Whatever you want, Yoko.
Who gave
Man.
them all this money?
I am holding out some faith that there's a good payoff.
I just have flashbacks of Kojima. Just like the biggest budgetiest vanity project.
Yeah.
But it's got just enough philosophical stuff going on that someone will call it genius, that people have called it genius. But it's just overwrought and takes like 80 hours to get where it's going.
Yeah. I would argue that
I like this way
Metal
better
Gear is even worse.
Yeah. I like this way better than Metal Gear because Metal Gear is saying things that are generally more obvious or less interesting to me, but take way longer and is way worse about all the things that Pete has been complaining about. Like, it is way more sexist and way grosser about how it treats some of its characters and even more up its own ass with the eccentricities of its like enemy designs and stuff like that and mechanical designs. So I prefer this. But we'll see. I mean, maybe I won't by the end of it.
I don't know.
We'll see. So that's Route B. We had way more to say about Route B than I thought we would.
Yeah, I thought it would be like 45 minutes, and then done.
By the time we're done, we're going to have like, 6+ hours of Nier Automata content?
I think routes C and D are pretty tight, actually. We might be able to do those in one.
They're basically the same thing, really.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's what I hope.
Yep.
I don't want to keep playing. Please don't make me replay the first section again.
It is different from here.
Shut up. Shut up.
You got enough difference.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you, listeners. Reminder, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at DeepListensPod, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got our comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/deeplistens. And Pete, thank you for joining us.
It was my pleasure. It's actually more fun, I think, when the games are not good.
When they're weird.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thank you, Em.
Thank you. I hope that next time we get some actual closure.
Closure would be nice.
Yeah.
Even
Or
without
anything, really.
would be nice. Just it being over would be nice.
I've seen 5 different endings now, and not one of them has been satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. Maybe when I get to see all 26, they will form the perfect ending. Thank you, listeners. Till next time, we will be back with Nier Automata Part C and D. Peace!